How can you let these untruths be told about somebody who just wanted to tell the truth? And, I went through a time where I was very angry at God. And had it not been for my family held in their Christian beliefs to hold me accountable and remind me daily of God's love, I probably would have walked away completely.
She walked away from $250,000 a year. She left behind a career in secular media that had taken her 15 years to build, a career that paid her well, respected her skills, and asked nothing of her soul. She left it because she believed something better was waiting on the other side. She believed in a mission. She believed sincerely and completely that the people running Daystar television network were who they appeared to be on camera. Her name is Jeanette Hawkins, and for 15 years, the organization she gave everything to made sure the world heard only one version of her story, the version where she was the villain. That version ends today. Before we go any further, let me be direct about what this video is and what it is not. Everything you are about to hear is drawn from verified public records, court documents, sworn testimony, and investigative reporting by credentialed journalists, specifically the Roys Report's Julie Roys, NBC DFW, CBS News, the Dallas Morning News, and the Texarkana Gazette. All named parties have had the opportunity to respond to journalists and investigators of record. Nothing in this video constitutes a legal conclusion. The Janette Hawkins lawsuit, the Karen Thompson lawsuit, and the Jennifer Falcon lawsuit were all dismissed or withdrawn without trial, with no court findings of wrongdoing against Daystar or its leadership. Daystar has denied the allegations raised in those suits. Those facts are as much a part of this story as everything else, and we will not obscure them. What this video will do is lay out the documented pattern, and when you see it clearly, from 2007 all the way to November 2024, you will understand why so many people who watch this story unfold from the inside have said the same thing over and over. This was not a series of separate incidents. This was a system. In 2005, Jeanette Hawkins made a decision she described in a March 2025 interview with Julie Roys on the Roys Report podcast as a leap of faith. She had spent 15 years building a career in secular media. She was earning $250,000 annually. By any professional measure, she had made it. But she felt called to something with more eternal purpose, so she accepted a position at Daystar Television Network as Director of Marketing at a salary of $80,000 a year. She took a $170,000 annual pay cut because she believed she was walking into a house of God. What she walked into was something very different. In the beginning, she threw herself into the work with everything she had. She built what had been a tiny two-person operation into a full-scale marketing department, a graphics team, a web presence, a special events arm, a dedicated writer. The department grew quickly because Jeanette ran it with professionalism and what she described as a genuine love for the people under her. One former staff member, Morgan Ferris, would later describe Jeanette as one of the best people she had ever worked for. That detail is not incidental. It matters because it establishes who Jeanette was inside that building before any of what came next. During her tenure, she also developed relationships with the Lamb children. She worked alongside a young Jonathan Lamb, humble, soft-spoken, the kind of young man who would drop materials off in her inbox so quietly that a coworker once had to tell her who he was. The heir to one of the largest Christian television networks in the world, moving through that building without a trace of entitlement. She also knew Rachel, then still in high school, sharp and ambitious and full of energy. Rachel came into Jeanette's office one day while Jeanette was admiring her pearl earrings. Rachel simply took them off and handed them over. That was the girl Jeanette knew, generous, fiery, and full of what looked like genuine promise. But there was another side to Daystar that the cameras never showed. In 2007, 2 years into her role, Jeanette Hawkins discovered that Marcus Lamb, the founder, the face of the network, the man who led millions of viewers in prayer every week, had been engaged in an extramarital affair with another high-ranking Daystar employee. According to her 2010 Dallas County lawsuit, covered by NBC DFW and CBS News, the affair had been ongoing for approximately 7 years. When Jeanette learned about it, she did not go to the press. She did not go to the police. She went through the internal chain of command because she believed institutions could police themselves when the right people spoke up with enough moral clarity. She was wrong. Instead of addressing the conduct, Daystar leadership, according to Jeanette's documented account, began pressuring her to participate in concealing it. She was expected to lie. She was expected to protect the brand. She was expected to become part of the cover-up. She refused. And from that moment, everything changed. Jeanette resigned from Daystar in 2008, wounded and disillusioned, but her departure did not bring peace. What followed, she told the Roy's Report in 2025, was a sustained campaign of harassment and intimidation. Private investigators followed her movements. She was blacklisted in ways she did not fully understand until doors stopped opening, professionally, personally, in ways that took her a long time to trace back to a source. The professional destruction was systematic and comprehensive, and the psychological toll of what she experienced became, in her own words, unsurvivable. She became suicidal. She was involuntarily committed to a mental health facility. The woman who had walked away from $250,000 a year to serve a gospel ministry was, by 2009, fighting to stay alive. In 2010, she filed suit. And then something happened that remains one of the most consequential moments in this entire saga. 2 days before Jeanette's attorney was set to file her case, Marcus and Joni Lamb were tipped off, and rather than wait for the legal record to speak, they went on Daystar's own program, their national Christian broadcast, the one that reached millions of households, and got ahead of the story themselves. Marcus Lamb stood before his audience and told them that 3 former employees were attempting to extort $7.5 million from the ministry. He did not name the women by name. He did not have to. The ministry's public communications made clear enough who he was talking about. And he framed it with spiritual language as an attack on the ministry, as people trying to turn pain into gain, as something Daystar would not stand for. The Bedford Police Department investigated the extortion claim. According to reporting by the Texarkana Gazette and confirmed by the Christian Post, investigators found no evidence of criminal conduct under Texas law. The investigation was dropped. Jeanette's attorney called the extortion claim utterly baseless. Law enforcement agreed there was insufficient evidence to proceed. The day after Bedford Police closed the extortion investigation, the very next day, Dr. Phil aired a nationally broadcast episode featuring Marcus and Joni Lamb, in which the extortion accusation was repeated to a television audience of millions. The program did not reach out to Jeanette or the other women for their side of the story. It did not note that Bedford Police had cleared them of criminal conduct the day before. Robin Roberts appeared on Good Morning America and referred to the women as blackmailers. For 15 years, the last public word most people had ever heard about Janette Hawkins was extortionist. Not because a court found it true, because Marcus and Joni Lamb had a national platform, and she did not. The Janette Hawkins lawsuit, the Karen Thompson lawsuit, and the Jennifer Falcon lawsuit were all ultimately dismissed or withdrawn without trial, as documented by the Dallas Morning News. Daystar agreed to drop its own countersuits at the same time. No court issued findings of wrongdoing. That is the legal record, and it belongs in this story. But the legal dismissal of a lawsuit is not the same as a finding that the events underlying it did not happen. Courts dismiss cases for evidentiary reasons, for financial resource disparities, for procedural factors that have nothing to do with the underlying truth of what happened. The record of what was alleged by named individuals in documented court filings, reported by verified news organizations, does not disappear because no verdict was reached. And the Karen Thompson and Jennifer Falcon suits added a dimension to the institutional record that is important to name directly. Karen Thompson, a longtime producer of The Joni Show, alleged in her federal lawsuit, reported verbatim by NBC 5 Dallas-Fort Worth, that in January 2010, after she began a personal relationship with a male coworker, Joni Lamb berated, belittled, and harassed her for approximately 2 hours over a relationship that was not, by the lawsuit's own assertion, in violation of any company policy. Thompson was subsequently demoted, barred from the studio, and told Joni Lamb did not want to see her face. Jennifer Falcon, who had been the head of special events under Jeanette's department, alleged that Joni Lamb's own father, Bill Trammell, subjected her to sexual harassment over an extended period, and that 2 months after she reported it, her pay was cut, and 9 days after a stellar performance review, she was fired. Trammell, according to the lawsuit, received a pay raise that same year. Both lawsuits were dismissed without trial, and Daystar denied those allegations as well. But the lawsuits described the same internal logic as Jeanette's story, a logic in which men in the family kept their positions regardless of what they did, and women who spoke up about those positions lost theirs. For 15 years, Jeanette did not speak publicly. She carried what she knew privately. She watched Daystar continue to grow, continue to broadcast, continue to ask donors for support. She watched Marcus Lamb die of COVID-19 in November 2021. She watched Joni Lamb take the helm of the network alone. She watched the next generation step into the spotlight. And she watched, perhaps with a particular kind of weariness, as the same institutional patterns she had witnessed in 2007 began to surface again, this time directed not at a whistleblowing employee, but at Marcus and Joni Lamb's own son. The story of Jonathan Lamb and what happened to him inside Daystar is documented in remarkable detail by the Roy's Report, whose investigation published in late 2024 drew on hundreds of pages of emails, audio recordings, and internal documents that Jonathan himself provided. The reporting reveals a campaign of institutional control that mirrors, with unsettling precision, what Jeanette Hawkins described happening to her nearly 2 decades earlier. Jonathan Lamb had worked at Daystar for years. He was, by multiple accounts, the intended successor. Marcus Lamb had, according to reporting by Laura Lynn Tyler Thompson and supported by a 2014 document that Jonathan later circulated, expressed his wish that Jonathan lead the network after his death. A succession plan existed. Jonathan knew the ministry, loved the ministry, and had given his professional adult life to it. But everything changed in July 2023 when Jonathan and his wife Susie refused to read a viewer comment on air, a comment praising Joni Lamb's marriage to Doug Weiss. It was a matter of conscience. Jonathan and Susie had private theological reservations about the circumstances of that marriage, particularly given the timeline of Weiss's divorce filing, which had occurred 58 days after Marcus Lamb's death. They did not want to publicly endorse something they had genuine questions about. That refusal, according to the Roy's Report's documented account, triggered a response from Joni Lamb that escalated over the following months into what can only be described as institutional warfare waged against her own son. Joni fired Susie immediately. She and board member Jimmy Evans then held a meeting with the couple in which, according to Jonathan's own written account, an email he sent to his mother that is on file with the Roy's Report, the two of them told him repeatedly to submit and used language to mock and demean the couple that was deeply inappropriate for any setting, let alone a meeting between a mother, her son, and a pastor operating in a spiritual authority role. Joni later spent a 2-hour private lunch with a local businessman, a man who spoke to the Roy's Report under condition of anonymity, disparaging Susie, using religious language to characterize her, and attempting to recruit him as an ally to bring Jonathan into line. Then, on November 7th, 2023, Jonathan felt what he described as a spiritual prompting to review the security camera feeds across Daystar's more than 30 cameras. What he saw was the head of Daystar Security, Shannon Kelly, opening the trunk of Jonathan's company car and reaching around inside. The next day, a mechanic found a tracking device. Shannon Kelly's own expense report, which Jonathan obtained and shared with the Roy's Report, shows that trackers were purchased in October 2023, nearly 2 years after Marcus Lamb's death, directly contradicting Daystar's claim that the trackers had been placed in all company vehicles shortly after Marcus died as a routine security measure. 9 days later, on November 16, 2023, Daystar's board convened. Joni, Jonathan, board member Tom Callender, and CFO Arnold Torres, who was voted onto the board during the meeting itself, and spent nearly 2 hours attempting to compel Jonathan to sign a non-disclosure agreement. Jonathan recorded the meeting and gave the audio to the Roy's Report, where it was published in full. Tom Callender told Jonathan directly, "If you do not sign the NDA, you are removing yourself from the board and from your vice president position." Daystar's attorney told him that challenging the authority of his organization was not something he had the right to do, and that his comments in the room constituted insubordination and independent grounds for termination. Jonathan's response, preserved on tape and now in the public record, was 4 words. "But all I've said is, I won't sign an NDA." He did not sign. Daystar did not immediately fire him. They spent months revising the ministry's bylaws and shoring up their legal position before stripping him of his board seat in April 2024, cutting his salary from $250,000 to $150,000, eliminating his company car, and placing him on a performance improvement plan. They also fired both of Susie's parents, who were Daystar employees. Jonathan was ultimately terminated on November 16, 2024, a full year to the day after the board meeting where he had refused the NDA. His termination letter was delivered to his home by Shannon Kelly, the same security chief Jonathan believed had placed the tracker in his car, who arrived carrying a gun and wearing a bulletproof vest. Let that image sit with you for a moment. A bulletproof vest to deliver a termination letter to the founder's son. None of this happened in isolation from Janette Hawkins' story. It happened in continuation of it. The machinery was the same. The sequence was the same. Someone raises a concern, reports something they believe is wrong, refuses to be silent about it. And the institution, rather than examining the concern, examines the person who raised it, labels them, surveys them, discredits them, deploys its legal and financial and social resources to make the act of speaking cost as much as possible. In between those two arcs, Jeanette's story in 2007 and Jonathan's in 2023, were other stories, the Jennifer Falcon and Karen Thompson lawsuits. The Trinity Foundation's financial analysis, which found that Daystar, classified as a church under IRS rules and therefore exempt from standard nonprofit financial disclosure requirements, donated only approximately 5% of its revenue to charitable causes. The PPP loan controversy, in which Daystar drew $3.9 million in COVID relief funds, and, after Ministry Watch reported that the ministry had purchased a private jet during the same period, returned the money. The honeymoon controversy, in which Joni Lamb publicly denied that ministry funds had covered her 2023 honeymoon with Doug Weiss, while the Roy's report obtained expense records showing approximately $100,000 charged to a Daystar ministry credit card for a resort in Los Cabos. The Trinity Foundation's separate documentation of approximately 24 round-trip flights on the ministry jet between Fort Worth and Colorado Springs, at an estimated total cost of over $760,000, corresponding to the period of Joni's relationship with Weiss. These are not isolated incidents of individual poor judgment. They are the output of an institutional culture, a culture in which the machinery of the organization was reliably deployed across administrations and across decades to protect itself, to discredit those who spoke against it, and to continue asking the faithful for their financial support. Which brings us back to where this story started and to where Janette Hawkins stands today. On March 12, 2025, Jeanette sat down with Julie Roys for a full interview that aired as episode 185 of the Roys Report podcast. It had been 15 years since her lawsuit was filed and more than 17 years since she had resigned from Daystar after refusing to be part of a cover-up. She spoke for nearly an hour and a half. She was clear, composed, and specific. She said that what she experienced inside Daystar felt like she was spiritually raped, a phrase she acknowledged was strong, but which she chose deliberately because it captured the comprehensive nature of what had been taken from her. Not just her career, not just her reputation, but her sense of herself as a person of faith. Her ability to trust institutions that claimed divine authority. Her willingness to believe that the face a ministry shows the world has any relationship to what it is behind the door. And then she said something that deserves to land fully before this video closes. She said she was speaking out because she knows there are other people going through the same thing who are hurting. She was not speaking for retribution. She was speaking because silence, she had learned through 15 years of living inside it, does not protect the vulnerable. It protects the institution. As of July 2026, Rachel Lamb Brown and Rebecca Lamb Weiss have co-authored Daystar's monthly leadership newsletter, describing themselves as part of Daystar's leadership team. Rachel's public social media describes her as a host, marketing director, and film personality at Daystar. Jonathan Lamb, the man his father named as his intended successor, the man who was tracked by private investigators, terminated by a security officer in a bulletproof vest, and stripped of everything he had built inside that ministry after refusing to sign a gag order, has, as of the available public record, no role at Daystar, no title, and no seat at the table his father built. The pattern that Janette Hawkins first identified in 2007 has not resolved. It has simply moved on to its next chapter. What accountability looks like for a ministry classified as a church, exempt from standard IRS financial reporting, operating across a national broadcast footprint, and wielding the language of faith as a social and institutional tool, that is a question the public record has not yet fully answered. But it is a question worth asking loudly, and asking often, and refusing to stop asking until the record provides something more than silence. Janette Hawkins spent 15 years wondering whether her story would ever be told truthfully. She said the independent journalists, the accountability reporters, the people willing to ask uncomfortable questions about institutions that have historically insulated themselves from scrutiny, she said they gave her something she had not expected to feel again: hope. The truth, she said, will set you free. She was right. It just took 15 years for anyone to let her say it. If this video helped you understand the documented history of Daystar Television Network and the people who tried to tell the truth about it, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Every primary source for everything discussed here is linked in the description. The Roys Report, NBC DFW, CBS News, the Dallas Morning News, the Texarkana Gazette, and publicly accessible court records. Read them yourself. Draw your own conclusions. The documents were always there. They just needed someone willing to read them out loud. This channel will keep following the documented record wherever it leads. Until next time, stay rooted, stay real, stay in the Word. God bless.